Wait. Okay, let's resume.
Okay, well, draw your attention to tab J. We have 5 items for the consent agenda. The first one is the proposed revision to procedural instruction entitled Ambulance Calls and Arrest Taken to Hospitals. This was part of a normal 5-year review. Just a couple highlights here. A couple of the sections were just rephrased for clarity, and then we had information regarding the naloxone nasal spray kit was added, requesting that this policy be approved.
I move approval.
Move approval by Commissioner Dean,
Second, Lucas.
second by Mayor Lucas. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, this next policy is a proposed revision to procedural instruction entitled Fiscal Procedures. This one contains a number of revisions that were requested by the Financial Services Division. I'm requesting this one be approved.
I move approval.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Dean, second by Mayor Lucas. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
The next item is the proposed revision to personnel policy entitled Jury Duty. This was also part of a normal 5-year review. It was simply reformatted for readability. There's no substantive changes. And request that this one be approved.
I move approval.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Dean, second by Commissioner Lucas. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, these next 2 policies were updated to incorporate the changes directed by this board through the resolutions presented at the November meeting. First one's the Code of Ethics and Rules of Conduct.
And those are the resolutions that Mayor Lucas put forward, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
I have one question on page 4 under Rules of Conduct. It says that the member will intervene or report, but it doesn't say to whom they will report. And I remember specifically, I wanted a clause that gives them the right to report directly to OCC rather than going up the chain of command. And I didn't see that in this Rules of Conduct.
I believe Director Bennigan will be commenting on that. The whistleblower piece was going to be incorporated in their policy.
Okay, but does it intertwine with the Rules of Conduct
Well,
or overlap? Does it overlap it, Chief?
yes, there would be some overlap. They can report it in either directly through their chain of command, or they would have the opportunity to report it directly to OCC.
Yeah, because sometimes it's the chain of command that is their concern. And so we just want to open it up to make sure that it's not squashed in the process.
Correct.
Right.
I guess the question is, do you want it in this policy, or is it okay in the OCC policy? That's the only question.
I think clarity is the best policy, so I'd rather have it in both.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
We'll take it back and add that line.
Correct.
And then the last one is the proposed revision to the response to resistance policy.
If you hold on, I think in the same Rules of Conduct on page 13,
Which tab is this?
we're on the tab J.
D.
End of J.
Is it?
J,
So there's a
D.
pink divider between each of the policies, so it would be the second to the last one.
Yeah, on page 5, I was just a little concerned where it talked about that the member would be required to submit to a polygraph test. And my uncomfortability with this is because I want to figure out how to make sure that it's fair that Does everyone who goes through this submit it to polygraph test, or it is, the decision of who's being considered? In other words, I'm not sure that that particular policy can be, can be submitted to fairly. And I want some elaboration on how we make sure that people are not singled out, but that it is, if it's gonna be a policy, everybody goes through it.
I'll tackle
Chief?
that one.
Yes.
Only the chief of police can approve someone to submit to polygraph. So it has to be recommended up through the chain of command. I think I've been chief 3.5 years. I haven't approved it one time. And if I'm remembering correctly, it has been used in the past, sometimes when it comes down to who said what, to figure out if we can determine who's telling the truth. But generally, my interpretation is this: we'd use it only as a last resort when we cannot find something out. And like I say, in 3.5 years, I don't recall sending anyone to polygraph.
I have one other thing. Also on page 5, I think it is number 4, bullet point number 4, it talks about display of cowardice. And so when I read through that, when I think about de-escalation of a situation, sometimes it takes more bravery to de-escalate than it does to, just jump in there and get physical. So I'm uncomfortable with the clause about not showing any cowardice. Let's see, that's on page 5, number, I think it's number 4.
I'll tackle this one also, Commissioner.
Okay.
That had been removed. I had it put back into policy when I became chief. We had several instances across the country. Maybe the one in Florida would be the most recognizable one, where there was an active shooter situation and the officer did not engage and did not go inside the school. And the purpose of this policy is to say that at certain times you have to engage. That the public depends on you to make that engagement. I don't think this overrides our de-escalation efforts or policies, but there is going to be instances where officers, let me give you an example. When we had everyone working and we were at various places through the city, we have to have people show up. And we have to have people be able to engage when they're told to engage in that kind of manner. So that's what this policy covers. It by no means says that we can't de-escalate. It doesn't mean that we can't try other things when we have time. But, if there's an active shooter situation and someone drives the other direction, that's going to have to be addressed.
Oh, absolutely. But I think there's got to be a better term. There's got to be a better terminology than cowardice then. I think that your explanation makes sense, but when I read it, it just says, hey, whether what's going on is correct or whether I think I could diffuse it, I don't want to look like a coward, so I'm just going to jump in.
I understand, but that's not the message and that's not our training. I understand what you're saying, but I don't think anyone who's gone to our police academy is going to see that the way you're referring it. I mean, that's why we spend 9 months or 7 months up at the academy working on this, and engagement and disengagement and all of those things, and the judgment and the decision-making process. So I see your point, but I would say that our training covers that. I will tell you this is, I'm sure the same term is used in our military and other things. This is taken directly. Some of these codes, our conduct unbecoming, are exactly mirror what the military has put in their policies. And so that's how we got to these terms.
And that's the problem, is
Well,
that the militarization of the police department.
But it's not the militarization. I understand, but I think it's a term people are familiar with and understand when we teach it.
Yeah. Well, I think, Chief, my concern is that when these policies come before the public, it's got to make sense to both the public and the police department. So I think the terminology has got to be where your folks understand what you want them to do, but the public also understands that we want some de-escalation process, and so how we say it is important.
Okay?
Chief, I'm sympathetic with what the Bishop Tolbert's saying, and I'm wondering if there's a way to express what you're concerned about in another way. I know that you say the people you train would understand what it means, but for instance, your example was someone refuses to engage when they've been given a direct order to engage, right?
Or a necessity.
Can we say it that way?
But not, we can try, yes, we can try anything, Commissioner, but I'm telling you, like, the example I gave was an officer who was standing by himself. There was no one there to tell him to engage. He was supposed to engage, right? His oath to the city and to this police department and to the citizens is to engage. I think that's what we're trying to capture here. And if there's another word and someone has it and we can get the exact, I'm not saying we can't go down that path. I'm saying why we have this. That's all I'm saying.
Chief, why don't you go down that path,
Yes.
and then we'll revisit it.
Okay, all right.
And I'd suggest that Bishop Tolbert might be consulted during that drafting process.
Okay.
He is a master of words.
We'll be in touch.
Only when I'm developing a sermon.
Well, work on your sermon.
Chief, I just want to say, I know that, again, this is challenging. Anytime you are tweaking and working on policies and procedures, and you come from it from a perspective and a level of experience that informs your own perceptions and judgment about it. Many of the members of this board come from a different perspective. And that's why the system, frankly, is designed the way that it is. And so, I recognize both sides of it. And it is, to the public, one of the things that I found so aggravating about the events of the spring and summer was the suggestion by educated, smart people that, the department somehow was devoid of policies and procedures. Just utter nonsense. We've got enough procedures to fill this room. And we've got good ones. We've got thoughtful ones that are developed over decades and decades and decades of law enforcement, which is a profession. It is a profession of precision. It is a profession of substance and content and difficulty and challenges, all of which we've faced from time to time over the many, many years. Not just us, but other police departments around this country. This is a tough-ass business, period. End of story. So I want to acknowledge that, look, the policies that we're tweaking and working on are just trying to continue to improve them, both in terms of their substance and content, but also in terms of their perception. So that's just a balance that is a challenge. It is not always neat. It's not always easy. And so this is sort of what that's all about. So appreciate your willingness to tackle these issues and to understand what's the concerns that are being raised, and so that's that.
And I just want the board, I'm trying to be respectful and say where I'm coming from. I'm not trying to
No,
argue
we
with you.
expect
I'm just-
nothing less.
Yeah,
Wouldn't want you in the chair if you didn't.
okay. Yep, we'll work on it and we'll bring it back.
Thank you.
Before we move on, were there any other things that you wanted to discuss or have us revisit on this policy?
That was my last note. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the proposed revision to the PI entitled Response to Resistance. Just a few highlights here. The language regarding de-escalation has been expanded and more clearly emphasized. Also, the prohibition on chokeholds. And just for clarification, we have never taught or authorized or approved chokeholds. We are just simply adding language, explicit language prohibiting them unless deadly force would be authorized. There were a number of terminologies and definitions that were added, and language was also added regarding the new response to resistance reporting requirements, specifically regarding timelines and accountability throughout the chain of command for the completion of that. I'm requesting that this be approved.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Bishop Tolberg, second by Commissioner Garrett. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And
Carried.
just to give you a brief update on the First Amendment policy, we hope to present that to the board next month for consideration, approval.
Very good.
Major, this may not, I don't, well, how do we ask it this way? In light of recent events in Washington and elsewhere, and First Amendment activities, and I'll have a separate, probably closed session discussion on security and some of the other things we're looking at. Can you just make sure, in light of all of those, that our First Amendment policy reviews do think about perhaps new situations that perhaps we weren't fully considering before, full building seizures, some of the other issues that we may run into. And that's just the request I might have for our next
Okay.
discussion.
Yes, sir.
Anything else? Deputy Chief Francisco.
Good morning, Commissioners. As we were talking about the word cowardice, I looked up some alternatives, and I would like to throw my vote behind pusillanimous.
Pusillanimous.
I think that's one we can all get behind. You'll find my items under tab D. To date, there have been 5 homicides in 2021 compared to 6 in 2020. There were 5 homicides at the same time in 2019, 2 in 2018, and 4 in 2017. Cases presented to the prosecutors in December of 2020 were 307. Cases filed were 99. The number of cases presented to the prosecutor decreased 15%, and the number of cases filed decreased 40%. In December 2020, we had 38 shooting victims compared to 34 in 2019. From January 1st to January 11th, we've had an additional 17 bullet-to-skin shootings. Drive-bys for 2020 numbered 510 compared to 413 in 2019. We had 30 in December of 2020 compared to 30 in December of 2019. We recovered 138 firearms in December of 2020 compared to 189 in December of 2019, with a year-to-date 2020 total of 2,440 compared to 2,443 in 2019.
Mark, let me stop you. One of the things I want to make sure I'm clear on, and I've had this conversation with you before, but when we talk about cases submitted for prosecution, the only sheet that I see that on is the one as it relates specifically to narcotics and vice.
Yes.
Is that correct?
So yes, so this number I'm giving you is for all our investigative units, and it's tracked by our fugitive apprehension section.
And okay, yeah, and I've seen that before, but where is that right now as I sit here?
I don't know that we actually include, you know, there's a whole bunch of things we can include in the book. So I think we rely on me giving it to you verbally versus in.
Well, let me just say it this way. You know, I want to have a more granular appreciation for all cases submitted for prosecution, both state and federal. And now, what I get is in the narcotics and vice. I would like to know that across programs, cases submitted for prosecution, because I think that's an important metric for me in my own mind. And then I would like to know more about those cases, disposition with respect to those cases, yellow sheets, dismissals, convictions. You know, those are things that I think are important in tracking performance. You know, our job is not just to arrest people. You know, our job is to get it all the way through the finish line. And granted, we act in concert with others in achieving that for better or worse. But that's an important part of our function. So I just want to make sure that I have good visibility, this board does, on the sort of totality of that beyond just the narcotics and vice. Yeah, having said that, in the narcotics and vice, and you and I have had this conversation, Chief, you and I have had this conversation, and I recognize that, you know, as we've gone through the last several months of challenges, that we've lost some momentum there in our narcotics and vice area. I recognize that at the city level, and in the marijuana possession realm, we've gone through some conceptual, philosophical changes with other partners that we have in those undertakings. But I am someone who feels strongly about our narcotics work, in that I believe that, in my experience, we talk about escalator offenses, feeder crimes, you know, drugs. You know, we all worry about homicides and bullet skin. That's sort of an easy thing to say. Yeah, empirically, that's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the things that feed into that as well, right? So if we're going to attack and address it, we got to get back down to the roots of it. And I think narcotics and vice is one of those areas, narcotics specifically, where we start to see some of those feeder roots. So my question to you is, when I look at this and I see that, you know, we're down substantially in cases submitted for prosecution. You know, what's the plan there? And how are we going to address it? And it's not just, you know, these feeder crimes that I call feeder offenses. You aren't just limited to narcotics. Narcotics are just an important part of it, of some of the violence that we see in the city. So I'd like to have a little better understanding of what the future looks like there, and trying to get things back on track in that regard. I see that search warrants executed and some of the other components of it are in place. Just cases submitted for prosecutions are lagging. We also see the reflection of that to our favor when we start looking at overall crime stats in the city and the percentage of increase in our Class A offenses, because we sort of artificially drive that down because the narcotic complaints and narcotic offenses are down. That drives our overall number down, but that's really at our own sort of election. And I know it's not something we choose voluntarily, but it still has an impact on our overall numbers, so I want those to continue to be sincere. But anyway, your response.
My response to that is two things. One, COVID has certainly had an effect on our operations, without a doubt. A lot of our face-to-face operations, we slowed down in a lot of ways for several months. We started to back up, and then we got hit again with a vengeance in the fall, and we slowed that down again. Now that's probably a smaller part of the overall reason. The second thing I would say is we've done a wholesale kind of refocusing of what narcotics and vice is doing, and you'll see some more about that in the near future. But they're really tied into our shoot review process, and we really look for a nexus of violence and drugs at the same time. So those guys are doing a lot of work in the assault and homicide realm in conjunction with their drug cases. So therefore, some of the previous year's drug work maybe they've done and the warrants submitted are now being submitted through the assault unit and the homicide unit. So the credit is not going there, even though a lot of the work is done there. So I think it remains to be seen how some of all that's going to shake out and mesh together. But clearly, with our violent crime problem in the city, we've had to really focus a lot more resources on it than we had in the past, and that heavily relies on the resources that narcotics and vice has. So I think those two things are contributing to what you're seeing as some of the drop in cases filed, because they're working cases, just not theirs. They're working them in conjunction with other units who then file the cases.
Well, I strongly encourage the department to continue its focus on these feeder escalator crimes in areas where we can address these issues before they metastasize and become bigger issues.
And I don't think you'll find any disagreement on what we want to do. It's more of a case of what can we do with what we have.
I understand that, but I also understand there's a lot of political pressure. There's a lot of optical pressure when you've got homicides and shootings, and that's what you chase. I mean, I worked for 10 years in the Middle East, and the Israeli government, they were great at running from bomb to bomb to bomb to bomb. What they weren't so great about is that grassroots effort. And And that's one of the things that we tried to bring to them, is a development understanding that how the social apparatus of some of these terrorist operations work. And that's where you get the hearts and the minds and the cradle to grave mentality. And there never was really a focus on that because they were always going from bomb to bomb to bomb. So I'm not suggesting an ignorance here, Colonel, in that regard. I'm just suggesting, my support for what might not be optically as pleasing to an uneducated eye, but to people who know the business understand that some of those offenses and crimes that are down the ladder, those are the offenders of the future. And so I just continue to encourage us to keep our shoulder to the wheel as it relates to some of those less glamorous, less public type of offenses.
No disagreement, and we are continually evaluating how we're doing and what we do, and we agree that's as important as anything. If you can break the cycle before it gets to violence, that's even better.
Colonel, when you add the information that Commissioner Garrett asked for, I'd like to understand, particularly for the ones that have been submitted for prosecution, and you're going to tell us what happens after that. I want to know, for instance, he mentioned yellow sheet, which I think means that the prosecutor's office declined it, but I don't know. I don't want to see yellow sheet. I want to see prosecutor declined so that I'll know what it means and anybody else that reads the report does. But I'd like to know, after we submit them, what happens to them.
Absolutely, and we will certainly endeavor to provide you what you want. I'd like to manage your expectations a little bit. Cases presented to the prosecutor, there's the information I gave you almost gives the correlation that we present it this month, it gets filed or not filed this month, and that is absolutely not the case.
Right.
Some of them languish over there for years. So we'll try and make a meaningful report that says something, but I just want to manage your expectations about the information we get back from them, and our ability to make we have our information right. It's getting their information that's difficult sometimes.
Well, but we know when we've submitted them and they're still sitting there.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
And so if it's submitted for prosecution and pending at the prosecutor's office and it's got, 6 months, 12 months, year and a half, whatever, I would like to know that.
Yeah, Mark, I just think that's some increased visibility that would be helpful to you and to the department for this board to have that. We get bruised a lot out there publicly when it comes to crime. It always seems to fall on the police department's shoulders. And sometimes that comes from some surprising corners. So I think just increasing our visibility and comprehension of that would be helpful to you and helpful to us to understand maybe the more of the complete life cycle of these crimes and investigations.
And I agree 100%. It'll be handy to have.
But I know it's difficult because you and I've had this conversation before.
It is.
We lose some transparency when it goes across the street. So
I don't want to leave you with the impression that we aren't at least somewhat aware of these issues, because we do talk about individual cases as management and where they're at and how they're going. So while it's not on a form for your purview, we aren't oblivious to it either. It's just not in an easily reviewable format like it is getting ready to be.
why don't you think about this conversation, and then I'm happy to have a follow-up conversation with you in the days ahead, and maybe we can.
Absolutely, because we're going to dig around a little bit and see what information is available and how we can put it in a format that's useful to all of us. So we'll come up with something, though.
Deputy
Yes, sir.
Chief, just a few points. The first of which is, while we have this conversation, I actually think we should include, because we have a prosecutor in this county at least who was sworn in for 4 more years last week, including everyone involved as part of the discussion on how do we share the information, being as straight up as possible, recognizing things that have happened in the past. And as somebody who gets pilloried daily as well for any number of reasons, I understand that all of us have some merit in saying, all right, how do we just figure things out and report both that earlier scale of problems, what's being charged, what's not, and what are some of the issues. That might be a point for me, and I will commend the chief on this. I know we are always willing to meet with any prosecutor around, but I would hope that maybe in a new year, we can try to continue those conversations and discussions too, because frankly, we just have to. Point 2 for me, I do want to commend, and I think this is the time to do it, there were staffing decisions made in connection with homicide, which I think have led to stronger results in our solve rates for homicides, non-fatal shootings, and I think that is something that has largely gone underreported. I think it's addressed an issue. It was a staffing decision, one that had some controversy, and I think it is worthwhile for people to know that that is a positive, and I commend the Investigations Bureau and our chief for that. A question I have for you is relating to jury trials and challenges arising from them. And I know you're not a lawyer and you don't pretend to be. You're smarter than all of us, actually.
I might pretend, you never know.
But I was talking actually to a federal district court judge the other day, and every now and then talk to Jackson County judges. And with COVID and the pandemic, our trial dates are pushed out so far. We're dealing with issues, how that trickles down on the system. Simple question is that having an impact on the work you're doing now, or are you measuring it as simply you refer the file over to the county prosecutor and they'll do what they will given the severity of the offense? But has that had an impact, and is it the sort of thing, because I do, as has been discussed here earlier perhaps, sometimes like to make calls to people even if it's not my job, in terms of how do we get you back into trials, how can we get things moving again? Is that having a negative impact, I think, on this department's ability in some situations to be able to solve crimes and find offenders?
Well, I wouldn't say it's having a negative impact on our ability to solve crimes, because, it's not that the court system doesn't really affect that. I think probably where it's having an impact is to move people through the criminal justice system in any kind of speedy manner. As you know, here in Jackson County, it's a slow process under the best of times, and this is certainly not that. So I think you would see that on the blue sheet, I think we have upwards of 22 cases, homicide cases, awaiting some sort of disposition at the prosecutor's office. That's a pretty high number. We don't usually run quite that high, and I know they are struggling with difficulty in getting their committees together to review these things, and it's just all that is taking a lot of time. And then you combine that with the detention facility, also under the best of times not able to hold what we really need it to hold, and this is again not that. So there are people getting out on the street that are potentially very dangerous, and they're right back out there to continue doing the things that they've been doing. So I think that's where we're seeing the effect. It's not necessarily on our ability to work cases, because we're going full speed ahead. COVID has had no real effect on us in that. We haven't had to curtail at least our violent crimes activities. So that's a roundabout way of saying I think the result of this and the overall impact is probably down the road and yet to be determined. If things open up in the next few months, maybe we catch back up, but the longer it goes, the harder it is for the court system to catch up, for sure.
Thank you.
Can I add to that? I do think it's having an impact. I agree with Mark. It's not about our operations. There's only so much room in the county jail. If I'm understanding things correctly, there has not been a jury trial since March of 2020. We are looking at not having a jury trial in Jackson County at this courthouse, I think through March of 2021 is the date I heard. We know we have homicide suspects that are at Jackson County Jail, which I believe have been there in the neighborhood of 3.5 to 4 years and awaiting trial. So we have issues of what's happening in the system. And as you all know, the violent crime in the city has not ceased. And so as we continue to work cases and make arrests, there's only so much room to put people that we consider to be violent people in the city. So I do think this is it's a cycle that needs some sort of relief at some point, because I do think overall it's going to be detrimental to the safety of the city.
Thank you.
I do have one other thing to go over with you. All we're giving out this morning, a handout with some PowerPoint slides. These were derived from last week's executive board meeting of HIDA. I just thought they might be of some interest to you a little bit. Some of it correlates to our experience here in Kansas City. The first slide shows the overdose deaths, and there have been they've drawn a correlation to increases during the COVID time, which, you know, anecdotally, we could all think, well, people out of work have time on their hands, and it's leading to some consequences, apparently, in the use of narcotics and overdoses. It's tough for the police department to match this correlation because we're only privy to certain data, the data we respond out on, and that turns out to be overdose deaths. So our 3-year experience has been pretty static. There was a little bit of a drop last year, but we matched 2 years ago. So I'm not sure what Kansas City specifically's experience is along with those. The next couple of slides just show the various overdose by drug type. That pretty much does match our experience. The fentanyl and that sort are our highest drug usage overdoses. Then the United States map shows the state-by-state comparison. Missouri falls about in the middle of our experience in increases. We're not the worst, but we're not the best. There's 2 outliers in there, Nevada and Idaho. They think they have bad data for that. They don't believe that they've experienced no increase. It's just the way their data was gathered. They're not trusting on that particular one. I think one thing that maybe will be a foreshadowing of what's coming to Missouri as medical marijuana takes hold and the potential of recreational in the future. You can see the slide for the youth usage in legal states versus states where it's not legal, and it's a considerable increase in legal states of youth, which it was never intended to legalize it for the youth. So there's no reason to believe our experience won't be similar or the same to this. This cannabis use disorder among youths up 25% in legal states. Yes, I had to look that up, what exactly that is. It's out of the DSM-5, and it's a series of usage patterns, and if you have 3 or more, you're at one level, more than 4, you're at another level, but it's pretty concerning. And then also hospitalizations in legal marijuana states. Colorado's experience up 101%, Alaska 45%. Colorado's been at it a little bit longer than Alaska has. So, as I say, I point these things out to suggest there's going to be some far-reaching consequences as this takes hold in Missouri, and it's certainly beneficial to learn the lesson, if you will, from states that have already gone through it and expect similar results here. And that's all I have for you. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to give it a shot.
I'm just stunned at any suggestion that legalizing drugs doesn't make our communities better. I just find that shocking, but if that's what you say.
Yeah, and I realize there's a lot of schools of thought on this, and I'm here to present these things as maybe a foreshadowing of what's coming. And if we think that surely arrests will go down, no question about that. But it's going to be replaced by a lot of things.
We could just decriminalize everything, and I bet our arrests would go down. Let's try that out for size.
I just hope that the powers that be are looking at some of these other unintended consequences, if you will, and preparing for them rather than reacting to them as they present themselves.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Very much. Okay, Deputy Chief Hicks.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Hicks. The Administration Bureau items are under tab E. First item is the lab report. This is a year-end report that goes over numbers for 2020. Just highlighting a couple things. First, the total lab backlog that we have now is significantly less over the past 3 years. And I think that's a good indicator of how hard the lab is working to get this done to help our violent crime problem. This is also in the face of remarkably high requests for services. Kevin Weiner, the lab director, noted in this report that the demand for services is incredibly high right now, and that's a direct result of the Investigations Bureau asking for more information and more lab requests for violent crimes.
You're getting away from the microphone.
The lab has also suffered quite a bit of vacancies. Right now, they're down 9 budgeted positions plus 1 grant position. And unfortunately, we learned yesterday that we're going to be down another position in February. But they're continuing to do their job, and this report shows the incredible job that they're doing.
They've certainly continued to improve, and we've made this comment over the last year or two that things have improved, and Linda certainly did a lot in that regard. I have not had the occasion to spend much time with our new lab director. How is he finding his circumstance?
He's doing an outstanding job. He's managing his staff to help all these backlogs move down. He has a whole direction for the lab for this year, and it all comes to eliminating this backlog and providing more lab results for crimes to solve crimes.
The request for services, which obviously is up significantly, is that just from the Kansas City Police Department requests?
Yes. Okay, moving on to personnel report. Let's make a couple of notes here. Right now, our strength, we have 1,845 members. Our budgeted strength is 2,026. We're down 181 members right now. Right now, we're projecting a potential for another 8 law enforcement members to retire before the end of March, and 1 non-sworn. That doesn't include the one that we learned about yesterday, so that'll bring that number to 9, or to 2 non-sworn employees before the end of March. Any questions?
Any questions? Okay.
Lastly, I just wanted to acknowledge the Human Resources Division and their work with managing the pandemic. They've been put in quite the situation to help manage testing. Now we have vaccines coming online, and they've done a tremendous job. Yesterday, Colonel Oaken made a comment in a meeting about if it wasn't for what HR had done, patrol would not have been as safe. And I just wanted to acknowledge them and all their work. They have an overworked staff for sure, but they're managing and they're continuing to roll with how this thing is changing. And they've done a great job. And that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for the hard work. Colonel Oakman.
Good morning, good afternoon. This is just our monthly community engagement from Patrol Bureau, and most of these slides will deal with December. And as you'll see, the Patrol Bureau and the department in general handled several Christmas events, and this just represents a portion, but as I mentioned, there was many more, including several from the Fraternal Order of Police who also participates in several yearly Christmas events. This one here was a holiday shopping event from Shoal Creek Division. And like I said, as you see, we do more than just patrol the streets and answer 911 calls. And this is really the part of what every good police department should do, is not just police your community, but be a part of it. Next slide. And it's more with bikes from Shoal Creek. And as you'll notice, as we're doing these events, we're also doing these in partnership with other businesses and organizations in the city. And Helping Salvation Army, which, as the chief mentioned earlier, not only with Christmas and other holidays, we're a strong partner with Salvation Army, as well as helping with our homeless population. North Zone, this is an apartment complex that members of North Patrol helped distribute toys to the community that's underserved in this apartment complex. And then taking it to the streets, which is another strong partner of Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, and actually all the police departments in the metropolitan area. And as you can see, they came out and gave meals to the officers that were working on the holidays, on Christmas. And this is something that, I always like to say that the members of the police department, and specifically Patrol Bureau, while everyone was out celebrating Christmas and the holidays, they had to come to work. They had to work their shift regardless of it being Christmas, 4th of July, it doesn't matter. They all show up, and just kind of put this in perspective that we had officers show up for work on Christmas despite the way 2020 has been, when you think about all the things that we've gone through as a city, as a police department. And to top it off, you have to come to work on Christmas. And they do it because that's their job, and that's the commitment they've made to the city. Thelma's Kitchen, another partner that donated meals to the department. And then our Explorers program, this is a portion of our Explorers that helped out with several holiday events throughout South Patrol last month. And this story, it's a touching story. You may have saw it on the news, where members of the apartment complex that burned down, who were displaced, and one individual was seriously injured and was in the hospital and lost her dog, and the patrol officers located her dog and brought it to her in the hospital. So it's just, and we put stories like this just to let the public, like I said earlier, that we want to be part of the community instead of just policing the community. And a lot of this stuff is not something that comes down, although it's the culture at KCPD, but it's not something that comes down from Patrol Bureau, the chief saying, hey, you will do this. Most of these stories, these are created and developed by the officers on their own. They take the initiative to do these things, and that's the culture that we've built here at KCPD, and it continues to build. So I just want to point that out. So moving on, my items are under here, tab G. I believe F. My tabs are under tab F. Sorry, I'm kind of crowded up here on this podium. Regards to the monthly offense summary, No surprise, homicides were up significantly. When you look at from the previous month, moving on. However, robberies were down year-to-date by about 7% and down 22% from the previous month. So that is some good news, as well as burglaries were down year-to-date 4% and down 23% from the previous month. Auto thefts were slightly up year-to-date, but down from the previous month. Any other questions about the monthly offense summaries? Moving on to response times. Response times were slightly up for December, but still down significantly from 2019 and 2018, which throughout all of 2020, you would notice that response times have been significantly down from 2019. We're hoping that trend continues into 2021, but that's pending on staffing, which is a big part of it. And the average response time was 6 minutes, 6.95 minutes. And that's from the time the call comes in till the officer arrives at the address. Central Patrol had the quickest response time at 5.43 minutes, and Shoal Creek the longest at 9 minutes, 9.52 minutes, which is not surprising due to the fact that Central Patrol is the smallest geographical patrol division, and Shoal Creek is one of the largest. As well as Shoal Creek has two sectors versus 4 at Central Patrol. So Shoal Creek has a larger area with a smaller amount of officers, and Central Patrol has more officers in a smaller area. So it's not surprising that they have the quickest response time. Calls for service. Calls received year to date were 967,170. That's down from 9%. And if you notice, most of the decreases in calls for service go back to April and May when the city was shut down due to the pandemic. We saw a significant decrease in calls for service. There's no questions about calls for service and response times. I'll move on to the traffic summary. Total citations were down year to date about 37,000. Once again, that can be contributed back to April and May, where there was a significant reduction in traffic citations. Moving on, total crashes year to date were down approximately 6,000. That was your typical non-injury accidents, fender benders. However, as you'll notice, fatalities were up 103 this year compared to 78 last year. So as you can see, accidents overall were down significantly, but the more serious accidents, there was an increase. And attached in your book is the fatality report from 2020. I'm not going to go through the whole report in detail, but just pinpoint a few highlights on the report. One significant issue on the report, which was seat belts. In 2019, 60% of our fatalities were not involving a seat belt. The victim did not wear a seat belt. Compared to 2020, that number shot up to 74%. So you can start looking at some of the things that we believe were contributing factors to the increase in fatalities. One, that 14% increase in not wearing seatbelts could possibly be one of those. As well as one that was also concerning is that one division had 36 fatalities. The next closest division was South Patrol with 20, and it significantly decreased from there. So there again, that's another indicator that my staff can look at, and we are looking at East Patrol, the seat belts, and there's some other contributing factors such as speed, which we saw this trend early in the year. We saw that early in April and May, and it continued throughout the year. We did do some enforcement action on traffic, and that's one area that we're going to have to put more focus in on speed enforcement. And then another contributing factor, if you look, was a combination of marijuana and drugs were present in 61 of the fatalities. And what we're seeing regards to the drugs in general, your methamphetamine, PCP, opiates, and then marijuana had a separate category. Now with marijuana, it's pretty difficult to determine because it stays in your system much longer than the other narcotics. But what we use is either we got information from a witness, the actual suspect in the crash admitted to it, or it was actually present at the scene. And it's one thing that we have seen an increase in marijuana usage in our fatalities. And it's my job as a patrol bureau commander to work with the staff in the traffic division as well as the patrol divisions to determine what contributing factors that are increasing motor vehicle fatalities regardless of what we determine. And this is not really an issue to discuss the whole political things around marijuana, whether it's legal or not. That's not my job. My job is just to ensure that we reduce the number of people that are killed in fatality accidents. And I think there's some things we can do through strategies, enforcement, and a big piece of that, I think we need to do a better job of education, and that's something that we're going to be working on from the Patrol Bureau. I already have staff in place from traffic enforcement section, traffic investigation section, the DUI section, and the accident investigation section, trying to develop some strategies and some education programs so that we can reduce this number. Because 100 fatalities is unacceptable, and we need to make sure through enforcement and education that we can reduce that number. And I just want the community to know that we're working hard to put some kind of plan in place to address that.
Colonel, will that plan include trying to get people to wear their seatbelts?
Yes, and I will tell you, two things that I've been here 29 years, and for 29 years, two things we've been trying to do on the police department is get people to wear seatbelts and lock their cars and not leave valuables inside their vehicles. And so far, it hasn't made a difference. Like I said, those are two things that have constantly been a problem in the 29 years that I've been here. And seat belts is one of those.
Can I add? I think there's a good opportunity here, though, when we do our community with cooperation with getting to the heart of the matter, to start talking not only about violence prevention, but how about seatbelt can prevent a motor vehicle death just as well. So I think as we go through the year here, we'll look for those opportunities to get that message. It used to be, seatbelt enforcement, there was ad campaigns everywhere. I believe there's some federal money to help establish that. I think that's kind of waned a little bit, and I think it's making a difference. I think that's one of those campaigns that probably needs to consistently be reinforced over and over again. And I think, over time, that's just kind of gone by the wayside, and we need to get back on it. Not only locally, but I think overall, we need to get back on it.
I think law enforcement's one of those things, particularly at a concentration level that we've got it here in this city. Trying to make these big jumps, big leaps, stride the Grand Canyon is just not realistic. It's fantastical. You just got to push the edges. That's what you can hope to do. When you look at statistics, pull them up year after year after year after year, and it's just striking to me when you look at things as burglaries, assaults. They're always within spitting distance of each other, these numbers. It's just statistically shocking to me that you can take a city of this size and this dynamic, and you can see year after year after year. It's like, how is that? Like, it's 642 of this one year, next year it's 628, and then 10 years later it's 691. I mean, it's just, so you try to push the edges is what you try to do, and the goal can never be that we're just going to make a 90-degree turn. We wish we could. It's just not realistic, and so pushing the edges is just kind of the nature of this business, and that's certainly, I'm glad to hear what you're saying there, Chief, is sort of getting back to some of those basics and trying to move those edges.
I remember click it or ticket and advertisements, and so I would even think state highway patrol, or state funds might be available to get some of those ads back in our area.
We do have a few state grants on the seatbelt that we do use, but as the chief mentioned, there's just not a lot of advertising out there anymore. And the last thing that I want to note is that, as I mentioned, the concern is with East Patrol, when you look at the same division that leads the city in homicides, also leads the city in fatalities. And there is a correlation between the two. You have any other questions? If not, that completes my presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
I knew that was going to happen.
Office of General Counsel,
I will take that one so she doesn't have to get up again. She has nothing for open. I see you have the submitted documentation from private officers licensing unit under tab G, and then she'll have things for closed board.
so that's a report of the Office of General Counsel? Okay. Thank you. Do we have Merrill Bennigan on the phone?
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioners.
Afternoon.
You will find the OCC report under tab H, which includes our monthly statistical data for the month of December. Also, 3-month comparison data for the months of October, November, and December. If you afford me a little latitude, we will have a deeper dive into our yearly numbers at future meetings, as it takes, there's a bit of a lag between the completion of the investigations. Do a deeper dive into the statistical analysis and work on some correlations. For example, as Colonel Oakman alluded to,
Kind of losing you here.
analysis as it relates to the complaint activity. But if you have any questions that's been, or I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Did we understand what he said?
You're going in and out.
I'm sorry.
You're going in and out pretty bad. Anyway, we could have you repeat some of that.
Okay, no, I was just saying that we were going to do a deeper dive in. Or,
Not working too.
I can hear you, but I keep losing the visual.
Can you go ahead and leave the meeting and join back in?
Okay. Okay, how about now?
Do you want to try again for us?
Right. Can you hear me now?
So far,
It looks like you have poor reception where you're located is what the issue is.
Okay. I'm gonna stop the video and maybe that'll assist.
Okay.
Okay. There we go. So what I was saying was that if you'll afford me a little latitude, we'll do a deeper dive into the yearly statistics for the Office of Community Complaints at a future meeting, as there's somewhat of a lag in trying to complete the work from the end of the year. And I think it's important that we have a total picture and an accurate picture of the statistical data for the Office of Community Complaints. And plus, with that review and analysis, we'll be talking about some of the correlations between some of the other departmental functions, such as what Colonel Oakman was alluding to in the reduction in calls for service and things of that nature. So we want to make sure that we put together a cohesive presentation as it relates to the analytical data for the Office of Community Complaints. But if you have any questions about the data that's been presented behind tab H, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
no questions, I guess.
All right, seeing none, I just want to also update you on the OCC policy revisions. I've met with representatives from the department, and I do believe that we are very close at reconciling some of the issues and concerns that have been raised by various members of the Board of Police Commissioners in regards to revisions to the OCC policy. Those conversations are ongoing. Hope to have this wrapped up shortly, but I do believe that we are in a very advantageous position to bring these discussions to a conclusion so that we can reconcile and have this policy approved and presented to the Board of Police Commissioners at a future meeting. Any questions?
Okay,
All right. Also, I'm sorry. All right, I'm pleased to announce that we have an official go-live date scheduled for the launch of the OCC website. It will actually go live on February the 1st, 2021. We've wrapped up all of our design build phase and all of the beta testing. We had our last meeting this previous Friday, and we cleared up all the aesthetics, make sure that everything was functional, tested all of the links and things of that nature. We're going to make the link to the website available on a limited basis to some of our community partners to get another set of eyes and opinions on that website. And also we need to make sure that we get the staff trained on how to manage the website in terms of uploading of documents and analytical data and things of that nature, so that we don't have to rely on the vendor to do that for us. So we're excited. We're really pleased with it. We've had a couple of people already see it around the department, and they've been very complimentary as well. So we're very excited about the website. And last but definitely not least, we didn't think we were going to be able to do it, but we are still scheduled to host our 7th annual Badges in Baseball Youth Officer Clinic on Saturday, February the 6th at 10 o'clock a.m. I want to give a special thanks to Executive Director Darwin Penny with the Urban Youth Academy, and Chris Evans, the President and founder of the I Am King Foundation, and also the owner and proprietor of the T-Shirt King, for assisting us in this effort. This year, the clinic will, of course, it'll be a clinic where officers and the youth will be able to work on various baseball skills and use that as a bonding effort. But more than that, we're going to have some very direct, open, and honest conversations regarding law enforcement and the relationship with the youth. And particularly, we're going to discuss some of the events of the past year. So we're very excited about that as well. Do you have any questions?
Merrill, is your clinic full yet?
Badges in baseball?
Yes. Merrill, is your clinic full, and how many students are you going to have?
The attendance for the event is capped at 60, but we're anticipating that we'll have anywhere between 40 and 50, so we can make sure that we're properly distanced and that we're protecting the health, safety, and welfare of everybody who's going to be involved.
February 8th,
February 6th.
February 6th, that's a
February
Thursday.
the 6th at 10 o'clock.
That's a Thursday, huh?
I'll be sending out a formal notice to the department and to the board.
Okay.
No, that's a Saturday.
That's the plan.
6th is a Saturday?
6th is a Saturday. If I'm looking on the right date, yeah, February 6th.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Merrill.
Thank you.
Audit committee update?
No report.
Mr. Kenner?
Nothing at this time.
Mayor Lucas?
I'll just have a few quick things. The first, and I will make this an ask very respectfully. Our technology issues continue to challenge us a bit. If perhaps even a practice run through on Mondays can help us do this all more efficiently. We've been doing this for a few months now, so y'all understand, but if we could really try to make sure we address those going forward. I continue to have a view, and I've shared it before. I do think that real-time public comment is something that we should try to get back to. Most other organizations, agencies, commissions, the city council, et cetera, have allowed for that. As somebody who's gotten shotted down and told any number of things, I understand challenges with it, but I do think that that is something that would be a public right. Something that Colonel Oakman said, and I want to actually emphasize it because we don't do this enough. Outside of programs or plans, there are officers every day that are reaching out to kids, adults, victims, survivors, all types of folks that aren't part of this big apparatus and isn't part of a presentation. Part of the reason I sit in this seat today is because there was a police officer, Chief and I have talked about him before, Daryl Chisholm, who was a major in this department, who died while he was working for this department. He died the same time he was here. He gets killed in a car accident. And he was somebody who said, I see potential in you, I see a future for you. Officers do that every day, and I do appreciate when we share that with the public and recognize that. In my list of things that aren't necessarily related, I did have a conversation with the fire department in Kansas City yesterday that mentioned that I believe almost 40% of their members have already received part 1 of the COVID vaccine. I meant to ask earlier to the chief, and I'll follow up later. Actually, if I can do it now. Where are we right now in vaccines? I know it's been a bit of a randomized process, but where are you so far?
Yeah, we've had one opportunity, and that's because a health facility had extra vaccine from their employees, and they got permission to open it up to first responders. We have not had our allotment from the state yet. We are waiting on that. We are in contact with them. We are exploring other opportunities with other healthcare providers to see if those opportunities exist for our members also. But so far, we have not had a true allotment to the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department.
Understood. I'll continue to work with you, no doubt, to make sure we're there. What I don't want to have happen is that random allotments are going different places and we don't have enough for folks here or anywhere, really. And so we'll keep working with you on that, because I'll admit, I'm the mayor of the city. I was kind of surprised at that, and heartened, but surprised that one of our departments had already received that many without everybody necessarily knowing what was all going on. So thank you for that work, Chief. And then one other thing that I just want to note, and just so y'all know me, I started my career in public service as a law clerk to a federal judge appointed by President Bush II. I respect laws, I respect structures. My view on this board is that state law creates this board. I'll be a part of this for as long as state law remains the same on that. And as part of that, I think as mayor of Kansas City, I understand an oath I swore to, and that is to make sure that whether it be a budget issue, crime issues, all the other sorts of things, my job is to make sure that I can be some level of voice for a diverse set of people that I hear from every month. And so that's what we continue to try to do. I do want to thank, and something that's not known a lot, the chief does reach out to me a lot about issues in Kansas City. I think all of us are interested in trying to address our crime issues and concerns, but there will be occasional disagreements as how we get to that. That's why you don't have a group of one, you have a group of five, and you have a department of many more. And I look forward to us trying to make sure we do all of that, because at the end of the year, we all want to say, chief, mayor, prosecutors, everybody on the board, that we've made a positive difference in our community. And so I look forward to doing that work throughout the rest of the year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Dean?
No comment.
Commissioner Garrett.
Just a couple of things. One is, Mayor, I appreciate, that position relative to the existence of this board, and I do want to see all of us, pulling on the same direction. I think that's critical to the citizens of this community, and it's critical to this police department to see this board operating in a unified way. That doesn't mean that we never disagree, because we surely do. So all I ask for from every member of this board, as this discussion of governance and debate carries on, is that we communicate with one another. I do not ask for agreement. I think agreement is the poison of good leadership. So I strongly encourage disagreement and debate, so long as it is always sincere, transparent, and direct. As to the public comment, I agree with the mayor that we need to try to do that. There are logistical and security issues relative to this police department that might not be shared by others outside this institution, but certainly would lend my support to that position, that we try everything we can to try to do that in a more representative and effective way, but do recognize that we have security issues with respect to our systems that are unique here. Continued thanks to this police department as it continues to operate in an extraordinarily challenging environment. I've had the good fortune over the last couple of months of running into a lot of officers, and just to every member on this board, would suggest to you that there's a lot of people paying attention to what we do here. And the decisions that we make and the conversation that we have. And it's somewhat sterile in an environment like this. But let's bear in mind that the men and women who rely on us to give good stewardship and good leadership and fair voice, That is a mighty burden. So too, I know that the tensions right now, and Bishop, you mentioned it in your prayer, rightfully so. These are tough times. These are tough times. And as someone who has been very vocally supportive of our police, I think officers know that those who cross the line, those who mistreat others, have no friend in me. I think I'm an honest broker in that regard. So it's incumbent on me, I think this is the only microphone I have to say as well, that as an unapologetic political conservative, how abhorrent the behavior last week at our Capitol. I don't care what side you're on. That violence is no substitute for protest and free speech. Period. End of story. So I appreciate the fact that the department is continuing to do its level best in an atmosphere right now that is very charged, but I wanted that said. Nothing further.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Tolbert?
No comment, thank you.
Okay, I regret that we're having a pandemic, and I regret the violence in Washington, D.C. Look forward to better times soon. I think we should be able to get the vaccine in Kansas City shortly. Look forward to that. With that, we'll ask for adjournment and go into closed.
I move that we adjourn and go into closed session.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Dean, second by Commissioner Tolbert. Is it a roll call vote?
Lucas, aye?
Pardon me,
Aye.
sorry to interrupt. We have the video. I thought we wanted on record during the open meeting.
Yes.
So before we go into close, sorry to interrupt, but if we could play that video that you requested.
Is Pastor Daryl Edwards of United Believers Community Church. The Message Bible says, the start of a quarrel is like a leak in a dam. Stop it before it bursts. Whatever our differences, we're all Americans. If we continue down this current divisive path, we can't say when the dam will burst, but when it bursts, no one on earth will be able to control it. So we stand together to say, let's stop it before it bursts. Phil, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm Pastor Phil from Abundant Life. Between Darren, myself, Pastor Chris, we represent thousands all over our city in the faith community. And it is past time for the body of Christ to come together for the sake of our city. Regardless of whatever political aisle you lean toward one way or to the other, it's time really that we came together arm in arm, supporting our law enforcement community behind us. Romans 13, 1-5 tells us that they are ordained of God for the good order of society, to keep society from all-out anarchy. And that is what we've seen recently in American cities, of all places, Washington, D.C. And so this is our appeal to say that this is our city in Jesus' name. It's time for us to come together and say, not in our city, to begin to pray together and repent of our sins and our division that keeps us apart when God is calling us to come together.
I agree with Pastor Phil and Pastor Darren. I'm Chris Pinion, pastor of Life Quest Church, and we need to come together in unity and just say, hey, listen, the church is the hope of the world. Like if you are a Jesus follower, the church is the hope of the world. And I love the way Pastor Darren said it. He said, in Christ, we are one, different but one, differences but one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's get back to what our country was founded on, and that is God.
Amen. Let's pray. Would you pray with us? Jesus, we appeal to you that God, your gracious hand would be upon our law enforcement community, that God, you would protect them, bless them, help them to deal with the issues that we face, Lord, we can become more just while they administer justice. God, we ask that you would help us as Christians, Lord, to center our faith on you. And we ask, God, that you would bring peace to our nation. That, Lord, you'd bring peace to our city and our communities, that we'd be ambassadors of peace. For Jesus, you said, blessed are the peacemakers. Help us, I pray, to be ambassadors for you in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you.
Okay, thank you. Let's conclude the roll call vote.
Dean, aye.
Garrett, aye.
Talbot, aye.
Wagner, aye.